All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. I have with me today Alan Dershowitz, world famous lawyer, also somebody very concerned about what's going on in the United States with our college systems, Ivy League schools, and the situation between Israel and Palestine. Alan, thank you so much for being on today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So, have you been shocked at the level of anti-Semitism in the United States and around the world since October 7th?
I have been surprised. We had the same level in the 1930s in the United States and in Europe. Hundreds of thousands of American Nazis marched down Second Avenue in New York, and many of them went to Madison Square Garden giving Heil Hitler salutes. Harvard University welcomed Nazi sailors and diplomats and sent a delegation to the University of Heidelberg shortly after it had fired all of its Jewish professors. Yale students swore they would never fight against Nazi Germany. So it doesn't surprise me that there are hundreds of thousands of young Hitler youth that are marching instead of with swastikas with the green headbands. What surprises me is that the university administrators don't have the courage to apply a single standard. If you say any words against anybody who is allegedly a minority, however minority is defined, you're expelled, you're disciplined. But you can say anything you want about Jews, Zionists, Israel, and the university does very little. They're starting to do something now that they're receiving donor pressure, but it doesn't come from the heart, it comes from the pocketbook.
Yeah. Do you think that part of this is that Ivy League schools have participated in indoctrinating people against Israel, or where did the youth come up with this idea in mass to be against Israel?
Well, clearly it's from the faculty. There are a lot of radical, woke, progressive faculty members who hate Israel, hate America, and they hate Israel because they hate America. These are not human rights activists. They've never said a word about the Kurds, who don't have a state and have been displaced and have been occupied. They never said a word about the Uyghurs. They didn't really say anything when Darfur was going on. And they wouldn't have said anything about the Palestinians unless the people who are allegedly occupying them are Jewish. This is all about hatred of the Jews, all about jealousy of the Jews, all about Jews being, quote, privileged and white. And the idea that this has anything to do with the Palestinian people is nonsense. If you're pro-Palestine, you should be anti-Hamas. Hamas is the worst thing that ever happened to the Palestinian people. Palestinian people are oppressed in Gaza. Israel left in 2005. They weren't particularly oppressed when Israel was there. I was there. I went to Gaza. I had dinner there, met with people. I've been on the West Bank. Ramallah is probably the nicest city in all of Israel. It's the Palestinian capital. Big stores with lots of high tech and cars, much safer than Jerusalem because there's no terrorism. If that's, to use Barack Obama's inept term, if that's unbearable, I don't know what bearable is. Life in Ramallah is fine, and life in Gaza City used to be fine until Hamas got there. So if you want to be pro-Palestine, be anti-Hamas. But these demonstrations are not pro-Palestine, and they have nothing to do with ceasefires. If a ceasefire were to be ordered tomorrow, if Israel withdrew all of its troops, these demonstrations would still occur. Remember when they started? They started on October 8th, before Israel fired a single shot. The demonstrations were in celebration of 1,400 innocent people being raped, beheaded, murdered. These are not pro-Palestine. They're anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, pro-terrorism.
Okay, so just to clarify, because on my show, I've tried very hard to be differentiate between Israel, Hamas, and the people of Palestine. But you're saying, from what you're seeing from your vantage point, that when you see these big crowds, especially at these universities that are pro-Palestine, this is not just the innocent women and children of Palestine. This is a celebration of Hamas finally giving it back to Israel after all these years. taking it out on the group that abandoned them, taking it out on their neighbor that's more affluent than them. What are your thoughts on that?
It has nothing to do with what's going on in Gaza today. It has everything to do with what went on in Israel on October 7th. It has to do with bullying. Israel was weak. It showed weakness. And 33 groups at Harvard said, yay, yay for Hamas. Thank you for killing all those people. It was all Israel's fault. The National Lawyers Guild, it was an appropriate military activity. Look, the most important day in telling us about the future was not October 7th. Nobody should be surprised that Hamas wanted to butcher Israelis. Everybody knew that was going to happen. The most dangerous day for America was October 8th, when all these groups supported and justified and cheered for Norman Finkelstein, said it warmed every fiber of his heart to see these women raped. And so many other students said essentially the same thing. And so it was the reaction to the murders and the killings that showed how deep this anti-Semitism really went among some people, not among the majority of Americans, not among the majority of college students, but and the media has played a role. Calling these demonstrations pro-Palestine is such a myth. It has nothing to do with being pro-Palestine. It's just anti, and pro-Hamas and pro-terrorism. And it's anti-American, because the reason Israel is so hated on college campuses today is because America is so hated on college campuses, and because the Judeo-Christian tradition is so hated on college campuses, and because patriotism toward America is so hated on college campuses. This is the hard left, progressive Stalinists. What we see now is a combination of Stalinism, which is no free speech for thee, but only for me, and Hitler Youth. It so reminds me of the marches that took place at the University of Berlin, at Munich University in the 1930s. These students are not the good guys. They're the bad guys. They're the ones who helped the Ayatollah overthrow the Iranian government. They're the ones who brought Hitler to power. They're the ones who kept Stalin in power. Students have been at the forefront of some of the worst movements in history, and now students are at the forefront of what may be the worst movement in modern world history, namely Hamas.
Yeah. Alan, you have a new book coming out, War Against the Jews, How to End Hamas Barbarism. Is there a way to effectively remove Hamas without the collateral damage of Palestine, or what does the book go through?
Well, I started writing the book on October 7th, so I finished it and wrote it in 30 days. In fact, I tried to get a new chapter into it today, and they said no, the book was closed. So it'll be available. You can get it now in advance copy on Amazon.com. The thesis of the book is that three things have to happen in order to set this straight. Number one, Hamas has to be forever destroyed the way ISIS and Al-Qaeda were destroyed, the way the Nazi Party was destroyed, the way the Japanese Imperial Army was destroyed. It has to be the Churchill-Roosevelt approach, total victory and unconditional surrender. That won't be enough, because that's the snake. But the head of the snake is Iran. Iran will send Hezbollah in if Hamas is destroyed. It will send in the Houthis from Yemen. It will find surrogates. And so you have to go after the head of the snake. The best way to do it, something Israel and the United States has wanted to do anyway, is to destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities. Because imagine an Iranian exporter of terrorism who can also export nuclear weapons, atomic bombs. That would be horrible. And the third thing that has to happen is the reason for these attacks had to do with the fact that Israel was very close to making peace with the Saudis, and including the Saudis in the Abraham Accords. And it's essential to send a message to Iran and to their surrogates. No, it didn't work. And the only country you can send that message is Saudi Arabia. And in response to that, Israel has to start making movements toward ending increased settlements in the West Bank and making a possibility of having a two-state solution with a Palestinian Authority that is not dominated by Hamas. If you had an election today in Gaza or in the West Bank, over 80% would vote for Hamas. So, the distinction between the Palestinian people and Hamas is way exaggerated. many of the civilians who are tragically being killed today in Gaza because they're being used as human shields by Hamas. But many of these people are the same people who cheered when a beheaded, raped woman was carried through the streets of Gaza City, and they were yelling "Allahu Akbar" and thank you. And a young kid calls his parents and said, "I just killed 10 Jews with my bare hands," and his parents are cheering and yelling. I mean, I don't have a lot of sympathy for those civilians. I have a lot of sympathy for 3 and 4-year-old and 5-year-old children, but they're being used as human shields. It's called the dead baby strategy. You create a situation where Israel has no choice but to go after the commanders and the rockets, and inevitably human shields will die. But to give you an example, a common example from every TV show you've seen, I go to rob a bank, and the police start arresting me, and I grab you as my hostage, and I hold you in front of me, and I shoot from behind you, and I'm killing civilians, I'm killing tellers, and I'm killing customers, and a good policeman takes a shot trying to kill me but kills you instead. The policeman isn't guilty of that murder. I'm guilty. The person who took the hostage is guilty of that murder. And the same thing is true in Gaza. Every single death of a human shield is the legal, moral, political, diplomatic, in every possible way, fault of Hamas. But the media doesn't show that. It shows a dead baby. It shows an Israeli rocket. And it says, well, 1 and 1 equal 2. No, 1 and 1 doesn't equal 2 when there's a third element there, and that is the human shield.
Yeah, interesting. Do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu bears any responsibility? Is he being used, overly used as a scapegoat, or was he just caught off guard like other leaders have been in the past?
All of that is true. He was caught off guard. I had dinner with him just 8 days before this happened in New York. I had a 3-hour dinner with him. I go back with him over 50 years, and he was totally caught off guard, but he's the prime minister, and he will be the scapegoat, and he will be the responsible person, just as Golda Meir was held responsible for the 1973 war. It's shocking to me how Israel, which has some of the best high-tech security, wasn't able to preempt or respond to this thing as quickly as possible. And I'm sure there'll be all kinds of reports after the war is over assessing who was culpable and who was responsible. And there's a real question about whether or not Netanyahu will be able to survive this, or whether we'll see a more of a unity government combining left and right into a center and getting the extremists, and there are extremists on both sides, away from the government. I think Israel needs a coherent centrist government at this point.
Okay. Final question. Representative Rashida Tlaib was censured and removed from her leadership position. Was that the right move? Is that an abuse of her freedom of speech, or did she abuse her freedom of speech to get the message out that she wanted?
Again, all of the above. She did abuse her freedom of speech. She abused her congressional privilege. She lied through her teeth about the hospital attack on the Gaza hospital. She knew it didn't come from Israel. She's a despicable racist. On the other hand, she has free speech rights, and I'm ambivalent. I'd like to see more about what the history of Congress has been previously. I don't think people should be punished for expressing political views. On the other hand, Congress has the right to express its views as well, and a majority of Congress expressed his views. So it's a close question. It's a difficult question. I wish there had been another way for Congress to have strongly condemned her views without necessarily doing something that looks to some people as punishment. Complicated question.
Yeah, it is. I've wrestled with it because the day before there were many that said, no, she has freedom of speech. And then she just kept going with this, river to the sea, and then trying to say that it was nothing. But I know you're limited on time. I appreciate you coming on. Best of luck with the new book, and I appreciate your time. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.